listening to Your Secret is Safe with Me, non-judgmental talk about infidelity with Dr. Marie Murphy. If you're looking for new perspectives on complicated relationship issues, you've come to the right place.
Days go by, they're crawling by.
Hi, everyone. I'm Dr. Marie Murphy. This podcast is all about expanding the conversation around infidelity. I'm a relationship coach, and I specialize in helping people who are having affairs make decisions about how to move forward that are truly right for them. On this show, we feature tools and guidance from my coaching practice, as well as advice from other professionals whose work pertains to the sometimes complicated business of romantic relationships. Today, I have the pleasure of talking with family law attorney Rodrigo Dias. Rodrigo is a partner at Greene, Taubman, Dias, Chernus, Simborg, and Dominguez in Marin. He is certified by the California State Bar as a family law specialist and has been representing clients in all of the Bay Area counties since 2007. Rodrigo earned his bachelor's degree from UC Berkeley and his law degree from the University of San Francisco. Rodrigo lives in Marin with his husband and their daughter, and he loves helping his clients resolve complicated moments in their lives as easily and efficiently as possible. Rodrigo's favorite flavor of ice cream is chocolate, and his daughter's favorite flavor of ice cream is, quote unquote, pink. I bet that pertains to a lot of things in her life, Rodrigo.
It does, Marie. It certainly does. Her room is basically covered, like Pepto-Bismol exploded in there, but it's her favorite color of everything.
I can relate. I had fantasies of painting my office pink at one point, and I had all these different colored paint samples up on the wall, and one of them, or probably more than one of them, were definitely in the category of Pepto-Bismol pink. So I can relate. Today, Rodrigo and I are going to talk about some of the legal implications of infidelity. But before we do that, this episode is brought to you by me, Marie Murphy, PhD. I provide shame-free, blame-free, non-judgmental relationship coaching. You can talk to me about the things that seem too messy or weird or stigmatized to share with your best friend or your spouse or even your therapist, including but not limited to matters related to infidelity. To learn more about my relationship coaching practice, go to mariemurphyphd.com. All right, Rodrigo, it's great to have you here today.
Thank you, Marie. Hi, it's so good to be here with you.
Awesome. So let's start off with like a problem that I hear from clients from time to time. Let's say I am married. I am definitely not in an open marriage. And I am having a relationship with someone else, meaning I am having an affair. And just for the sake of fleshing out an example, let's say that my spouse and I have children and we own a home and there's some money involved and one of us makes more money than the other. What do I need to know? What are my legal rights? Let's say my spouse finds out about my affair and decides to divorce me. What do I need to know about what might happen?
Thanks, Marie. Well, if you're here in California, California is what we call a no-fault state, right? So we don't typically look at the reason for the divorce. We just look at that one party wants to get a divorce. The only time really that would come into play would be, I would say, in the child custody arena.
The infidelity, you mean?
Yes, but it's not necessarily the infidelity, but more of who the other person is. And who are they? What is their character? Are there any problems with them? Have they been introduced to the children? And should they be introduced to the children? So from a legal perspective, really it's a no-fault state. From a custody perspective, we're a little bit more concerned. There's this idea of not being able to unring the bell, is what we call it. So when infidelity happens, and let's say the third party is now an integral part of your life, meaning that you've actually established a relationship with this person, you're going to want to, at some point, maybe introduce them to the children. And what rights does your spouse have to deny that or to put limits on that? And do you have a right to introduce them despite your spouse's rights? And if you do so, what can we do now that you've done it? And we can't really unring the bell. And that being said, in regards to California being a no-fault state, you have to remember that judges are human, right? And so we all come in with our own biases. And whether or not that judge has experienced infidelity in their own lives or has an opinion about people who are unfaithful, that becomes an issue, right? Even though it's not supposed to, we all have our own biases that we walk through life with. And so from a legal perspective, like I said, it's a no-fault state. There are implications, though, that you want to be cautious about it. Now, this is California, right? And I practice in California. Other states are different. Other states, particularly southern states, that does become an issue. And I can't speak directly about the laws in specific states, but generally speaking, I did have a case recently where there was one party that was unfaithful. There was an issue as to jurisdiction, whether it would be taking place in a southern state or here in California. And we had
divorce
to
itself, you mean?
Correct, exactly,
okay. Yeah.
exactly right. And we were concerned about whether my client's rights would be affected if we proceeded in California versus in the southern state. And it turns out they would, because although in this state, the property issues, the southern state, the property issues would not be impacted. Spousal support would be impacted. Suddenly, the judge can take that into consideration. The fact that my client was unfaithful and had an affair during the marriage, suddenly it would impact their ability to seek spousal support. And that becomes a real issue if you think about it in the sense of a party who has not worked their entire life, has an affair, a slip up during the marriage, and then suddenly finds themselves unable to obtain spousal support. Sure, they've got, their rights from the property, but their rights in regards to support are gone or impacted. And that becomes a real problem. And you can just kind of spin the idea of like, what happens if that spouse now became pregnant due to the infidelity? What happens then? And now the third party partner is out of their lives and husband's out of her life. She's going to really find herself in a really tough situation in some of these other states. But again, back to California, no fault state, but we do, of course, bring in our own biases, and it could come into play in regards to the custody arena.
Okay. Wow. So many things here I want to ask about. So, let's start with custody. Let's say that the bell has been rang, if I'm getting the terminology correctly here, and the partner, the former spouse who was having the affair before the marriage dissolved, the kids have met the affair partner. What right? Let's say I'm the aggrieved other party, the other former spouse, and I don't want the kids to have any relationship with the affair partner. Do I have any right to restrict that contact, and on what grounds?
Yeah, absolutely, you do. Parents in California have the exact same equal rights, barring anything that the court may have done to impede those rights or restrict those rights. When the judge makes a decision, the judge has to make a decision that is in the child's best interest, right? And of course, parents are going to have an opinion as to what is in their child's best interest. One parent will say, well, we need to protect our child and make sure that he or she is not early exposed to a partner that may not be around for a long time. Maybe this is just a fluke. Maybe this is just a month relationship. We don't know what's going to happen. The other parent says, no, we can't lie to our children. We need to be open and free. What we see typically is that a lot of parents, well, first let me back up. There's only two ways to resolve anything in family law, whatever the issue is. And the two ways are either by mutual agreement or by court order. And in California, we don't have jury trials for family law. It's decided by a judge, a single sitting judge. So you're really putting a lot of power in a single human being to make a decision about your family. And oftentimes, many of the judges, if not all of the judges I've appeared before, usually tell us, are you sure you guys don't want to try to work this out before I make a decision for your family? And that's where we really try to go, is try to reach an agreement. And the agreements that we typically reach are that the parties agree not to introduce a romantic partner to the children until, number one, that relationship is solid, meaning that they've been dating exclusively for at least 6 months. Number two, they've had this discussion with the other parent, and the other parent has had an opportunity to meet this other partner and have any discussions and questions answered. And then at that time, they sit down with the kids and say, this is Mary, or this is John, whoever it may be, and this is who they are and how they fit into our lives. It can be a very confusing time for children. Children, though, I don't think we give them enough credit sometimes. I think a lot of children are very easily adaptable. I know in my own life, and perceptive. Yeah. And I know in my own life, my daughter is 4 years old and she has 2 dads. And when we pick her up at school, some of the kids look at us like, wait, are you daddy or are you papa? And I'm like, oh, I'm papa. And I've had kids ask me, how does she have 2 daddies? I'm like, well, some people have 2 daddies, some people have 2 mommies, some people only have 1 daddy, some people only have 1 mommy. And
some people don't have a daddy. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And the thing is, usually the response that I get from the kids are, okay. Right. And they go on and they go play. Yep. So, it's important to protect our children, obviously. And as parents, we are very protective of our kids. But it's important to also give them the benefit of the doubt that they understand. They know. Okay. And you have equipped them with the tools to understand what's going on in the world. That's not to say that you should just disrespect your other co-parent and introduce whoever you want to your children. The most important thing in custody is discussion. A proper co-parenting relationship requires communication between the 2 parents. But ultimately, if you leave it up to the judge is going to make the decision in the child's best interest.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. What about, so if I understood you correctly, since California is a no-fault state, infidelity does not factor into spousal support decisions in California?
Correct, right. But under the law, that's not one of the factors. In California, we have what we call 2 types of spousal support. We have either temporary spousal support or what we call pendelite spousal support, which is spousal support that is ordered during the pendency of the litigation, and that's done using a simple calculator that we use. And then there's post-judgment, or what we call permanent support, which lasts past the judgment. It has a different goal. And in that case, the court must consider 14 different factors, the Family Code section 4320 factors. And those factors have everything to do from marital standard of living to the ability to pay, to the supported party's need, to age, and so forth. But one of the factors is not whether there was infidelity. Whereas in other states, that is a factor. That is a factor. And in other states, there are juries for family law cases. California does not have a jury system for family law cases.
I bet that significantly changes the dynamics and the stakes of the game in other states.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you can just imagine you can almost envision the courtroom drama of the Southern lawyer in his seersucker suit, bringing up all of the ways that this woman went and cheated on her husband and so forth, and the drama before it, and how he worked day in and day out, and she was off with another man. So yeah, I mean, I personally have not attended any of those trials, but you can imagine what they must be like.
Yeah, I am actually imagining it right now, and I'm a little bit terrified.
It can be a bit nerve-wracking, especially if you are someone who has never worked outside the home and raised your children the entire time. The last time you may have had a job is 20 years ago. And you felt abandoned during the marriage for whatever reason and had an affair, and now you find yourself divorced. No spouse support, children are grown, and yeah, you may have some property, but that's about it. It can be very scary.
Wow. Yeah. Oh my God. How does that, let's say, oh, geez. What would you say if, for our listeners in other states, if anyone is facing a situation like that, what is a first point of contact for finding legal assistance if you don't have legal assistance lined up quite yet?
Well, that's a great question. So what we usually do is when someone's looking for legal assistance outside the Bay Area, or if we're not taking cases at that time because of our own caseload, we tell them to first look to their local county bar association. Marin has the Marin County Bar Association. San Francisco has their own bar association, and they usually have a referral service. And if you are either low income or unable to pay an attorney, there's typically pro bono attorneys on that list that will take your case. And you can meet with an attorney, and you, in California, and I'm sure the other states, once you meet with that attorney and have that face-to-face contact or Zoom contact, then it creates an attorney-client relationship. Now, that doesn't mean that that attorney is going to represent you, but you can trust that that attorney is bound by the rules of ethics of their own state bar and must maintain your entire case confidential. So your spouse would be barred from speaking to that attorney or to their firm because of a conflict of interest, and anything you've said is completely confidential. So you can get those pieces of advice and what steps you need to do to protect yourself and to protect your rights by doing that. There's also the American Academy of Matrimonial Lawyers, AAML, which a lot of my partners are fellows of, and they have a great resource, and they're located throughout the United States. Excellent resource to find attorneys there as well.
Good. Yeah, I think that's going to be helpful for a lot of people. Now, I would like to hear some of your stories. I know you have seen a lot in your days as an attorney.
I've seen a lot. The thing is that oftentimes what we talk about many times is physical infidelity. There's also the idea of emotional infidelity, right? And so I've had many people in my office come in and say that I am in love with this other person. Nothing has happened, but I feel like I am cheating on my husband or my wife because I am totally in love with this person. Yeah. And, one of the a great scenario that came out of one case was a situation just like that, where husband really fell in love with another woman, but nothing physical happened. And they filed for a divorce, and he was able to openly communicate that the reason for the divorce is that he had fallen in love with this other woman. And at the end of the divorce, which actually didn't take all that long to resolve, because the more you are able to still speak to your spouse, the easier a divorce actually is. Mm-hmm, sure. At the end, the ex-wife delivered flowers to his home that he was now living with his new girlfriend and say, "Congratulations on your new relationship. I'm looking forward to co-parenting with you. I wish you," and I'll call her Mary, "I'll wish you and Mary the best going forward." And they have been able to have this blended family where the children go back and forth without a schedule. If they want to spend more time at mom's house, that's not a problem with dad, and vice versa. And they have a really great relationship. I've also had crazy situations where I represented the wife in one divorce and the husband in a different divorce, and two absolutely different cases. And as I'm talking to my clients, the facts seem very, very similar. I'm like, what happened to you on Saturday night? Sounds like what happened to my client Bob on Saturday night. And Bob is not his name, by the way. So, as time went on, they finally disclosed that I was representing both. Not a conflict of interest, because obviously two different, but they were dating one another. And we finalized both divorces separately, independent of one another. And then one day, I get a call from my now former client. He said, "Rodrigo, you're never going to believe what happened." And I said, "What?" He goes, "Well, and they had two kids each in the family, and the kids went back and forth between mom and dad and everything. And they couldn't find little Timmy's iPad. And so they did a locate my iPad and used dad's phone to do it. Well, turns out that my client, let's call him Bob, and Bob's now ex-wife had the iPad with her at midnight in her car. Her car happened to be at now my other client's ex-husband's house. So now these two are dating. Yeah. And that's how we discovered that there was basically a swap, for lack of a better word. But a word of advice, I'm not encouraging infidelity. I'm not trying to help. But keep in mind iPads and cell phones.
You told me another story that I want to make sure we share. It's the picture of the you-know-what story. This is another, watch your technology, people. If you're going to cheat, don't, I'll let you tell it.
You've got to be really careful with AirPlay. I think that's what Apple calls it. When AirDrop or AirPlay, it's basically when someone sends you a text message on your phone, it's going to show up on your iPad as well. And a lot of times people forget that they have that connection between the iPad and the iPad. And I'm talking about Apple products because I own these products, but I'm sure it happens with other products as well. And I had an instance where, again, different little Timmy was playing with his iPad, and suddenly he gets a picture from, dad's girlfriend that mom didn't know he had a girlfriend and didn't know all about mom's girlfriend. And now little
in the anatomical sense,
he knew everything about my dad's girlfriend. And that led to a very interesting dinner conversation and ultimately a divorce. But I caution people, and the safety side of it as well that we're not discussing is that sometimes infidelity can also create a lot of rage and anger in people. And, iPads and phones can be a dangerous tool because what people don't realize is how easily it is to track you. Like that story I was telling you, we were able to track the iPad to mom's car when we knew where she was. Now, if you're somebody who is having an affair, you really want to be careful because it's very easy to track someone.
Yep.
And it can be very, very dangerous. And so you want to be very careful with that. That being said, I'm not condoning it or trying to help people in their affairs, but at the same time, you want to be careful of your own safety.
Yeah. And also, that is a critical point. But in addition to that, how do you want your partner to find out that you've been having an affair? Like, is that how you want it to happen? For them to see a picture of your affair partner's junk on the kid's iPad by accident? Or do you want to be able to sit down and have a conversation with them at a time that's appropriate for the both of you? Accidental disclosure isn't comfortable for anybody.
Yeah, and no, I'm Portuguese. I was born in Portugal and immigrated here to this country, and so I speak Portuguese. And my mom, when I was growing up, always told me, she still tells me, in Portuguese, we say, "A verdade é como azeite em água, vem sempre ao de cima." What that means is truth is like oil in water. It will always come to the top. And at some point, first of all, you're not as slick as you think you are. And you're going to be found out, right? And so the question is a sense of time. It can be now, it can be 20 years from now, but it's going to come out. And the question is, what you can control is how does that come out? And what are the optics around that, right? So that it isn't about blaming that one partner wasn't there, one partner wasn't good enough whatsoever, or another partner didn't care enough or didn't love enough. But, we are humans. And this idea of monogamy has been kind of shared that maybe it's not for us. And I know many people who are in open relationships, and that works for them. The California law has even taken into consideration that there can be more than two parents for a child, particularly in instances of surrogacy, where you have same-sex couples and a donor, either an egg donor or a sperm donor, and they want to be a parent too. Well,
Legal
California
parent,
law
yeah.
now allows that to happen.
Mhm.
And the court has to make a decision as to what's in the child's best interest, how to divide up the time when these parents don't get along.
Right.
And really what's interesting is, how do we then figure out child support, which has really, been a two-parent system. So these are all sort of developing areas of the law. And as we think more about relationships and as our idea of relationships evolves, is monogamy for us? And if it's not for us, it works for many, many people, and that's perfectly fine. For some, it doesn't, and I don't think we should pass judgment on that. But I think we need to really be talking to one another, and particularly talking to the person that we are going to bed with about that.
Yeah. It's so hard. I mean, we're in such an interesting historical moment where the possibilities for non-monogamy are expanding in new ways, or at least for a lot of people, they're expanding in new ways. But yet so many of us are still, of the mindset that marriage is monogamous, marriage is forever, marriage is till death do us part. And it creates a lot of internal and external conflicts in our individual selves and in our marriages or committed partnerships. And it can be really hard to pick all of the pieces of what this means for us apart in time to prevent something like an affair happening, which can create so much discord and distress. But doesn't have to. And I really like that you go ahead, Rodrigo. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, I was just saying, you're absolutely right, Marie. And, a lot of it oftentimes is cultural. And, I had a client come in once, a potential client come in just for a discussion. And she was referred to me by a friend. And she is from Latin culture. And she came to me because her husband had left the home and was having an affair with another woman. And I started speaking to her about, this is what divorce looks like. This is what we have to do, the steps of it. And she looks at me and goes, "No, you don't understand. I don't want a divorce. I want you to help me get my husband back.
Yeah.
I need you to call that woman and tell her to go away." And I can't do that. That's not what my job is.
That's not how it works.
And, it was really distressing for her that I wasn't able to save their marriage by just, reaching out to this woman and saying, "Listen, please break up with my client's husband and have him return home." She was really distressed because she did not want the divorce. And you're right, it was, for her, marriage was lifelong, and even beyond life. And the infidelity was aside. It was small. It was small compared to just having her husband back. That was the most important thing. So a lot of these things are ingrained in us because of how we were grew up, but also cultural. In so many different cultures. If we think, in Latin America, in the Middle East, how is infidelity treated, and particularly of your gender. So these are all really different issues. But from a legal perspective, what we can do as far as California is try to protect our rights as much as possible, protect our clients' rights as much as possible, and handle the custody issues. And there's no cookie cutter way of handling a custody matter. It really is family dependent on the dynamics between the parents.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that you told the story earlier of, how this can work out in a way that really is okay for everybody, especially when there's good communication on all parties' ends. And that's something that I help people with, because it can be so hard at times to get beyond what we think we're supposed to be doing and get beyond our own ideas of having done something wrong or having been wronged by another person. Do you have any cautionary tales of how badly things can go when you don't communicate and you don't accept another person's limitations or choices or what have you?
I find that a lot of my clients create a situation in their head that's worse than reality.
Oh, yeah.
And what I call the fear of the unknown, right? And it doesn't just have to do with handling, how do I tell my spouse that I've had an affair? Or how do I tell my spouse I found out about their affair? That's a big one as well. Like I've had clients come in and say, I found this on my iPhone. What do I do? Do I just keep it quiet and hold this and for the rest of my life? Or do I confront him or her about this and sort of let it grow inside me?
Yeah.
First I would say, like, sometimes what the scenario we create in our head is much worse than the reality of what will happen.
Amen, brother man.
So,
this is what I see all the time with people.
and so we really need to not drive ourselves crazy trying to put ourselves in the other person's shoes, or especially in their head, trying to figure out what are they going to think, what are they going to do, because you're not going to know until it happens. Okay.
Yep.
Number two is sometimes it helps having someone else in the room as a neutral, as a guide to help you through. I remember in one of my former relationships before I was married, we went to marriage family therapy. Well, we went to a marriage and family therapist. We weren't married. But the reason for our therapy was not to stay together, but to break up. How do we break up? And still like each other, still respect one another. And to this day, he's still one of my best friends, and he's happily married with his family, and I'm happily married with our family, and we see each other all the time. But, it can be a little scary. Well, it can be very scary. And particularly if you're constantly holding it in, because the anxiety will only build up. It will only get worse. So the sooner you can address it, and either it's addressing it directly with your partner or at least in therapy. In Marin County, we love therapy. We love therapy. Everyone's in therapy. We love therapy. But even just having a voice or an ear that you can talk to that is confidential, that you can really spill your guts, is going to be so useful for you, because then you start to process, what is this going to look like? You can role play. What is this going to look like? But yeah, I've had situations that have become unfortunately violent when the other partner finds out, and the police have been called, and people have been arrested, and domestic violence restraining orders have been issued. I would say that's rare. But what an attorney can do for you is also role play. One of the things that a client reminded me of is that we're called counselors, and we're called counselors for a reason. We know the law, but we also know the psychological background behind it. I personally have a master's degree in clinical psychology, and so that has been very useful in dealing with the different personality that I have coming in through my door on my Zoom calls now. But that has been really useful. And sometimes what we do in my office is that we will role play about how do we tell the other side about this affair, or how do we tell the other side that we want a divorce, or how do we even explore the idea of divorce. And all of these can be very scary, but there are so many different options. No option is right. And I'll just warn your listeners that the things you hear about divorce, the things you see on TV about divorce, are always going to be the drama, are always going to be the worst case scenarios, because those are the ones that people want to talk about. No one ever wants to talk about, like, I got a great divorce from my wife and we get along just great, because that's boring. No one wants to watch a Netflix special on how great divorce worked out for them and their family. Right? We always want to see the drama. My very first job, I remember my boss told me, you do one thing right and the client may tell 2 or 3 people. You do one thing wrong, they'll tell 20 to 30.
Sure.
And it's true. When something happens, when something's dramatic, and I think maybe we're just built like that. We like the drama. We like, oh my God, I can't believe that happened, type of thing. We want to talk about it. But keep in mind, if you're considering a divorce, if you're considering your legal options, it doesn't have to be scary. It doesn't have to be like you've heard or what you've even seen on TV. It can be really boring, actually. And boring is good.
Yeah.
Boring is good. And boring will get your family to the next stage. Rarely do I find somebody who is getting got married because they want a divorce, or we're looking forward to a divorce. That's never the case. Even if you have a premarital agreement, a lot of people think, oh, that's just thinking that we're going to get a divorce. It doesn't. But, it's not something we ever want to go through, but it's a part of life, unfortunately. And it's a part of a lot of people's lives. And us as attorneys, as counselors, we are here to assist them in making that pathway, helping them make that decision in the best way they can do that.
I think that's such a great message. I hear a lot of people's fears about divorce potentially being the end of life as they know it. And I always tell people it may well be the end of life as you know it, but it's also the beginning of the next chapter, which may be even better than you can currently imagine, even though it's hard to see that right now.
Yeah, so many times it's really hard to see what life is going to be like after a divorce. And with my clients, I typically sit down with them and we map out the road do a roadmap for them. We talk about what is life going to look like in 3 months when we're really in the trenches, in 6 months when we're getting closer to trial if we haven't settled, in a year, which we're hopefully done. If not, then I've had cases last 4.5 years. But those are the more complicated financial ones, usually, or there's some mental health issues that we're dealing with that really just need some time. Mm-hmm. But we make these roadmaps of where do we want to be with our client in those time frames. And we want to make sure that we check in with our client each time and look back and say, are we where we were planning on being? And if not, why not? And what other resources can we bring in to assist our client, whether that's going to be counseling, therapy, whatever it may be, a custody evaluator to assist the children and determine what is in their best interest as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's fantastic. I'm sure that roadmap is tremendously reassuring to a lot of people.
It is, but oftentimes that roadmap has a lot of offshoots. So we sometimes have to take a turn and get off the highway for a little bit and get back on. So, but for the most part, we stay on track.
And you can't get where you want to go if you don't have a plan for getting there, even if there are some detours along the way.
Absolutely. I think having a long-term plan, long-term goal of where you see yourself, and unfortunately for people who are going through a divorce, who have been, on the other side of their partner cheated, they don't necessarily want the divorce.
Right.
They didn't step out of the marriage.
Right. They didn't
and
sign
so
up for
their
this.
goal would be and their goal would be to fix it. Like, look, I can excuse that slip up. Let's just get back together. And unfortunately, at least in California, is that once one party wants a divorce, it's going to be granted. The judge is not going to require anyone to stay married when they don't want to.
Yeah.
And you just can't, convince somebody, as that lady who was wanting me to call her husband's girlfriend and ask him to come home. You can't convince somebody to come home. You just can't sometimes. And what you can do is watch out for yourself, protect your children, make a plan for that, and let the other stuff go, unfortunately, sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much, Rodrigo. It's been amazing talking with you. It's been a pleasure, Marie. Thank you. I'm so glad. Before we let you go, tell our listeners where they can go to learn more about you. What is your website?
Oh, sure. So my website is marinfamilylawattorneys.com, attorneys.plural.com. So that's marinfamilylawattorneys.com. And we are located in downtown San Rafael by the Historic Mission. And we represent clients actually all over, not just the Bay Area. I represent clients all over the Bay Area, but we have a partner who lives in Southern California. She represents clients in Southern California. So we actually represent clients throughout California. And we have done international custody cases. We have done interstate cases. So we're very familiar with the different laws. We practice in California, but we have a number of resources both on our website and by just giving our office a call.
Great. Thanks so much for being a resource.
Thank you.
Take care, Rodrigo.
Thank you, Marie, and thank you for what you're doing.
Oh, yeah, my pleasure. Okay, bye for now.
Thanks for listening to Your Secret is Safe with Me with Dr. Marie Murphy. Make sure to click subscribe to get updates on our latest episodes.